So the summary of where we are now is again the three matzovim. The three matzovim in terms of the relationship between Zoh and Malchus, Yosef and Yehuda. There is the matzav mitzad the bria itself. So there's this hierarchy, this relationship, distant somewhat, of one level to the other, but everything's nicely integrated. So the nimshal, it's husband and wife that are friends, not yet husband and wife. So then there's the hashpah of Zoh to Malchus. That hashpah draws on Keser. However, there's a much deeper connection, Bi'adini. And Bi'adini, that is when the hashpah is not mitzad Zoh, but the hashpah is mitzad Malchus. I just wanted to add just the following part of the posuk, which I didn't mention yesterday in our overview, and that is that it brings here that when Paroi appointed Yosef, so he said, Al picha yishak kol amri, so you will be the sustainer, the provider. So Zoh as being that means that's your job. Your job as Zoh, as Yosef, is to be mashpia in Malchus, in creation. But the throne, it remains aloof beyond you. Now Yehuda is saying, however, if bi'adoni, then you Malchus, rather than Zoh, will connect to this kisei ekdal mimeka, which Malchus can access. Because the Shedesh of Malchus is in Pnimis HaKeser, or the Etzem of Keser, in the words of Maamar. And for Zoh to connect, and to have the Gilui of the Etzem HaKeser, which is a Keser, which Paroi Keser says is withheld from Zoh, how do you then Komecha Kapara? You'll have through Bi'adoni, then Zoh is suffused with the Gilui of Etzem HaKeser, which you cannot access on its own, but it's only it only connects to through being mashpia in Malchus, but not some hashpah, but hashpah that comes as a result of Malchus. So the Moshel Ben Nefesh Odom, to illustrate this, he's starting to explain, is the inyan of Dibur. And what did he point out about Dibur? He said there's two things. Number one, all of the other faculties, all of the other koiches are for the person himself, but Dibur is to communicate to somebody else. That's Aleph. And moreover, he said in the middle of his Dalet, Dibur is communicated in such a way that the person goes out of self completely. The Dibur leaves the person and becomes a Dovid different. And therefore, that means that the koich HaDibur, even before this actually is manifest, the very faculty itself, what's in Yonai, what's its content, what's its ma'ida, what's its chidush, that a person can go outside of himself. And likewise, Malchus. Now, the point here is that to go out of self, that draws on the etzem, because of etzem and neshama, the true beligvulness of the etzem of the neshama, that a person can transcend his own metzius. To transcend one's own metzius is contrary to the nature of metzius. The nature of nature is selfish. Survival, survival is the most natural component of nature. Under all costs, nature seeks to survive until it's overwhelmed. Dibur really is the capacity to go beyond self, to give a piece of oneself to somebody else that now belongs to somebody else, as it were. So that is an atzmizdike tchuna, component, quality or property. The koiches and all of the other koiches, as he says, they giluim, they're natural expressions of the nefesh, and they bekiruv. They're intimate expressions of me, close to me. And there's a whole order to that closeness. The higher you go, the closer. The closer you are, the closer the faculties to the nefesh itself. But dibur is completely separate. And why? Because that draws an etzem on nefesh. So there is a malchus. That's just all to explain. Why malchus is mushrish, not stam in keser, but in the etzem of keser. The etzem of keser is the nimshol for the etzem on the shomer. The essence of likus. Pnimis keser is bound up with atzmus. All to say, in other words, for the Eibishter to create otherness is mekerich atzmus only. All of the other spheres are expressions of him. Talking about Tzilus here, it's all it's all one with him and Bekirov to him. The word Atzil doesn't say it here, but elsewhere Tzilus is from the word Eitzel, which means near, close. But Malchus is the ability, as it were, it's a kerich atzmi that Eibishter can create something else. That's the true chiddush. It's the ultimate atzmistic property. Okay, but let's go further. Now we're up to say we have a general understanding. Yeah. Hope Adam is okay. Not usual to miss. All right. Hine, I say. This whole thing began because, let's remind ourselves, the whole beer here begins because the Alter Rebbe, let's just review the basic question of the Maimer. The Haftarah, which is aimed the Parsha, so in general it is. The Haftarah is the Nevuot Yecheskel and the reunification of the Shvatim. The northern kingdom, which were called Yosef, they were called Yosef because it was dominated by the tribe of Ephraim. It was the dominant tribe. Ephraim and Menashe, the kings all came from Ephraim and Menashe. And then the southern kingdom is called Yehuda, so it's in Nevuah that the two branches will become one in Yecheskel's hand. However, the question is that it's not b'diuk. They're not b'diuk matched, because in the Parsha, Yosef is superior, and in the Haftarah, it's Abdi Dovid Nasi Lehem Lo'ila. So we have to say, therefore, that even this Hagosha of Yehuda to Yosef, the Mail of Yehuda is being brought out, which we already explaining. The Biyadani is that Kachomecha Kefadoi, the Etzem Kesed, you're only accessed through me. So what already answered the question. That in this story, the Mail of the superiority of Yehuda is Merumas. But the question was on the Alter Rebbe, and we have now got the answer already, but the question going back was the Alter Rebbe's beer in Torah Oyer, explaining the Parsha. It's not a beer on the Haftarah. Talks about the Maila of the Beis Hamikdash being doimim, and it's Maila over the Mishkan, which the doimim was at the bottom, but the Mishkan was made primarily of higher forms of life, of Tzimeach and Chai. So the Alter Rebbe right away, is pointing out the Maila, strengthening our question. The Alter Rebbe's beer is pointing out the Maila of Yehuda in his explanation of Vayikosh of Yehuda. Now we have the answer because it's there in Biyadini, but he's going to explain this further now. Going back to the beer in the Beis Hamikdash doimim, the doimim, which is also the union of Malchus and Dibur, because doimim is an inanimate object and a word is an inanimate thing. A word is just the collision of the five organs of speech that produces sound. That to the hearer who doesn't understand the language, it's just doimim. It expresses nothing. It's within the word that an idea is being conveyed. So that has to be clear that the union of doimim is also malchus, is a moshel for malchus. So let's continue now. The Alter Rebbe explains the entire why is it that the earth, we see the property of bittul in all of God's creations? Where do we see the property of bittul? We see it on the earth. In square brackets, sha'oretz, himidras tachas kapis ragli akol. Lashon the Alter Rebbe, that the earth, midras, is something that is tread upon under the palms, literally the soles of the feet of everything, all tread upon the earth. So what's the reason that in the Oretz Dafka, this is the yin of Bittul, Mipnei, Shemachshova, Eretz, Kodma, L'Shamoy. Even though the process of creation, heaven comes first, the higher earth must come first, and then Oretz, finally comes the earth at the bottom, the universe. However, in Machshova, that's the intent of the whole process of creation, of all the Giluyim, is Hashem's, as Al Tebes says in Tanya, Perkam Bevav, right? It's not for the Giluyim, because they're actually Yeridim Eipon of Yisborech, but Hashem desires the Tachton. So, if you look at the bittul that the inanimate world exhibits, this is the daimim is in a state of bittul, as opposed to in square brackets. The nature of plant life is growing things, is that it grows in height, in height, visnasus, and raising upness, as it were. We see bittul, the inanimate objects, to not assert themselves or elevate themselves. So, because so this property is because the shirish of the doim is high in Tzemeach, and therefore it has this bittul, this natural bittul to, which is really in its source a bittul delikus, whereas Tzemeach has a lower shirish, and therefore a sense of independence in self is manifest. Right, so the shirish of doim malchus is mushish in the etzem of delikus, and therefore the bittul is absolute. So that's the dimim gashmi. Now there is a bezor malchus. Now, like where zon malchus, sheheim, zon malchus adug m'shamayim v'oretz. Zor is shamayim. Shamayim, the luminary zar, manifestation, giluyim oir, and oretz. Or another parallel, daimim mitzimeach. In our world, the inanimate and the plant life, the growing, the elevated, the more sophisticated forms of life. So the reason is that malchus is bebittel. The reason that malchus is bebittel, because it's shirish is in the etzem of keser, in keser. The manim shirish dezo. So therefore, since the shirish is in the pnimis of the course, therefore it naturally has this bittel to the absoluteness of Hashem. Now continuing. Looking at this property in Dibur. We're good so far. Yeah, v'yashloima, with the second paragraph, you say, this, that the parallel, the moshel for Malchus within the person is Dibur, or gam b'negei la bittul de Malchus is also true with respect to the bittul property of Malchus. We're going to look at the bittul property of Dibur in detail. That the bittul property that's manifest in the nature of speech, in words, also exhibits the bittul that we see in Malchus. And that is Shnei Inyonim. There's two Inyonim to the bittul of Dibur. Talking about our bittul, our Dibur, which parallel the bittul of Malchus. Number one, Shadibur Eina Inyin Shamayla. Dibur is not a virtue per se. A parrot can speak. Dinyonim Shekol HaKoiches Hu Shemegalim Es HaNefesh. All of the other koiches reveal something. One's seichel, one's midas. It reveals the nefesh. Inyin Shamayla Shleimus. Each one, each koyach, each faculty, revealing another virtue, another maila. So the koyach hadibush eine gila nefesh. Speech is not expressing something of the nefesh itself. Again, speech is the collision of the five organs of speech, producing a sound. So and again, for the person who doesn't know the language, there's nothing there. The person who doesn't know the language gets the dibur. That's all he's getting is the dibur. There's no mile. Sounds are produced.
You mean even though that when a person expresses himself, he expresses himself through dibur. So dibur does express what's inside.
It does, but that requires a whole avodah of the listener to extract. In the dibur, there's something. You're right. It's like an envelope. Dibur is an envelope, or it's a box, a container, right? Which is why the Hebrew word for word is in fact teva, which means a container. So when he's speaking about the word itself is a box. Yes, inside it. After 40 years, it can, from the dibur, it can be adrabah. It's rooted in etzem hanefesh. It's the key and the access to the etzem hanefesh of the person. But the dibur itself is a box. It's not Yinish Shamayla. That's the paradox of Malchus. That's the first thing. It's not telling you the word itself is not telling you not expressing any Maila or Shleimus per se. Again, it's a sound. The parrot can repeat the same sound.
Is it like Malchus because Malchus is doesn't have any virtue for itself, but it only receives? So there it's a dibur it has nothing for itself. It's only a receiving from the seichel or from the machshava, etc. Okay.
Yeah. Malchus is a channel, a funnel for the other faculties to express themselves. That's one inyan. One inyan of its bittul. Its bittul is it doesn't claim that it has any maila. It's there to serve. It's there to serve something that it'll convey through it. Another inyan. He's elaborating on what he's just said earlier. Dibur, it's only through dibur that a person can go outside of his whole metzius. He leaves his own world. What's his own world? His own beliefs, his own feelings, his own thoughts, his own understanding. And he leaves that and through his speech conveys it, tries to somebody else. So there's the point that he said before, this is an atzmisdika property. To go beyond self is an atzmisdika property because the nature of self is self, me, and not somebody else. To connect to somebody else and to convey, to give a piece of oneself to somebody else, that is true bittul. He's saying this is true bittul, to give a piece of me to you. And it's for you. So these are the two properties of bittul in Malchus. Let's repeat them again. Number one, to say a word, there's no maila. There's no talent, there's no virtue of the nefesh manifest in producing a word. Again, a parrot can speak. Secondly, that's one end of bittul. There's no maila of the person there. It comes to me, but it's bottle. It's not bringing out, look at me, I'm expressing a virtue. There's no virtue, there's no talent. There's no talent in making a sound that is a word. The second thing, the second inyan of bittul that's in dibur is that through dibur, a person can go beyond his metzius and connect to another person. Now, spelling this back with respect to Malchus, about bittul the Malchus. So Malchus has these same two properties. The noisef lazesha Malchus ein the inyan shel giloi. Number one, Malchus is not a giloi. In Malchus, Hashem is not expressing any virtue, any sphira, any midah. That's number one. Second thing is, he read this lahachris or lahabris esalivroy. Malchus descends to create otherness, to create creation. Finite creation. That's not the diak, it's not finite, but the diak is otherness going completely outside, as it were, of a likus of the Eibishter himself. So this is the property of Malchus, that the Eibishter can connect and goes and creates outside of self. Not the self, which is the ultimate bittul, drawing on the etzem, because again, the nature of self is my world, and that's it. Now,
but didn't you just say that the whole? So what's the big chiddush? We just said that Malchus is nothing for itself. Nothing is So what's the big deal that it goes out and for something that, being that you're saying lechatchila, malchus is only a makabel. So what's the big chiddush that it? Well, naturally, it's nothing for itself. So therefore, it's going and helping others.
No, it could be nothing from itself. That's one level of bittul, but the next
what?
There's just on a simple level. There's a simple, not accurate marshal, but you can have a humble person. He's a humble person. He's a humble person doesn't take himself seriously, and he's humble. He's still in his own world. Then there's a second virtue of bittul, is serving somebody else. That's a whole new level and much greater level of bittul. It's one thing you're a humble fellow, and you don't get in anybody's way. You don't draw attention to yourself, and you sit in the corner, and you're a humble guy, not expressing anything and not drawing attention. The next level of bittul is that you're sweeping up the shul. You're serving somebody else. So that's a yered, this lahachis, lahavas nivroy. That's a much greater expression of bittul when it's about the other person. So the first level is, it's not about me. I have nothing. I have no mind. Don't look at me. I've got nothing to say. That's one level of bittul. Another level of bittul is not only it's not about me, but it's about you. That's a whole different level of bittul. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So via shloima, the bittul zeh sheba malchus, this bittul of malchus, this second level, this higher level, is hinted to what the Alter Rebbe says. Where he says, She Yehuda Malchus Aloshen Leido Bittul. He said that the word Yehuda comes from the word Moide. And what's Moide? Moide is to submit to somebody else, to thank somebody else. Thank is thank you. Heido Bittul Shat Bittul Deido who? What's the Bittul of Heido? Thank you. Thank you is already thank you. It's acknowledgement to somebody else. He's being mevatel himself to the one to whom he gives his thanks, his acknowledgement. That's the higher level of bittul. Not just that ich bin garnished, but it's about you, completely beyond the self. And that's hinted to by the Alter Rebbe when he says that Yehuda is the inyan of Heidah, because Heidah is not just bittul within, but a bittul that is a bittul to somebody else. Clear? Good. Now it gets more nuanced. We're going further. Yeah? Eisvav. It's known that they shot the maybe is hasech. So we know Yedua, Ranat. As you know, Tafresh Nontes, famous Hemshech of Maimorim, that is the Seder in Yeshivas that you learn this, it used to be anyway, that in Zal, that was the first time you learned, and then you learned Samach Vav. What it speaks largely, the whole good chunk of it speaks about the Mile of Malchus. It starts off Rosh Hashanah Dike Maimer and explains the Mile of Malchus of Dibur Barichas Gedoyle. So it's Yadua, it's known, it's known, we know this from experience. When you have an idea and that you've grasped in your thought and express it orally, verbally, so the idea becomes clearer and deeper. It crystallizes immeasurably by talking the idea more so than it was within machshav, within oneself. Not only speaking words of love. So you have a feeling of love and you say the words, I love you, and you say words of endearment, you're not simply expressing that feeling you had, but it actually grows with the words. So why it's important to express these words and speak words of endearment. In the unification of Zon Malchus has to be preceded by Divrei Ava. And likewise, all the midas, they come into Dibur, they get intensified. Reason, as we explained, that the Shoresh is an Etzem HaNefesh, so therefore, and the Seichel and Midas are not. So when they come into the Dibur, they unlock the Shoresh of Dibur, which is Etzem HaNefesh, and that suffuses the Seichel or the Midah that was being Nimshach or being Mashpia in the Dibur. Through drawing down and investing the idea or the emotion in Dibur, they are now drawing, the feelings themselves now draw on the Nefesh in a higher place, which accesses through Dibur, and therefore the idea becomes deeper and the emotions deeper. That's what he says in Ranat, as it's referred to, Tavish and Tes. There's a lot of Yesh Loimers here, and it would be wonderful to really have a crystal clear understanding of the nuance of the Chiddush in every place. At any rate, Yesh Loimar, Shagam Dargas, no, big Chiddush coming here really, Taka, that you can see. It's a long Yesh Loimar that ends at the end of the paragraph. Let's try it together. Shagam Dargas and Devishim Mishom Dimishachim Asechel Amidas. Okay, they stop Shusam B'Dibur. Even this level in the nefesh, that from there, which comes Seichel HaMidas, through being invested in Dibur, right? So he just, let's get this clear. He just said that when Seichel HaMidas go into Dibur, they draw on the Etzem HaNefesh. However, this level is ilamati midargas hanefesh shenimshach hadibur atzmoi. That's still lower than the actual level of dibur itself. Rooted in etzem hanefesh, deeper than what the seichel and midas access to going into dibur. Now let's stop right here. This is what he said earlier. Remember, there's three matzavim. There's three matzavim of the yachas of Zoh and Malchus. One is no hashpah, all finished. I'm not speaking of that. That's Mitzad Abriya. In the Nimshon, you're not talking. You could talk, you're not talking. It's the person. The person, he's thinking, he's feeling, he could speak, he's not. That's the ordinary matzav. Second matzav is the hashpah. Zoh is nimshach in dibur. And when Zoh is nimshach in dibur, we learned, as he's saying right now, he's being masbir, not dibur malchus. Then it draws on the accesses, inyan of paroi. That is what? Keser. But what did we learn earlier? What happens then? So then the inyanim babishtalshalos Zoh taki gets a gilui that it wouldn't have otherwise. We explained yesterday shit, the rotzen, v'chulu. But that's all only when the whole relationship starts with Zoh. Zoh wants in mashpia, in malchus. What he's going to say is, this is all to explain the biyadini, but still doesn't access the shoresh and malchus. When the hashpah comes from Zoh, when the true shoresh and malchus, which is the etzem hakeser, when is that accessed? When the hashpah comes not mitzad Zoh, but mitzad malchus. Not because Zoh wants to be mashpia, because malchus wants it. Then kamoicha kapala. Then the Isperim and they call the Haydin. Then the Etzem on the Shoma is the Etzem of Keser is revealed. So he's saying now. Let's see the words.
Where do you see that? Where do you see that in the words?
Which words?
That you're just saying V'yesh Loimar.
We'll say it again. Let's go through. Say it again. V'yesh Loimar shegam dargas hanefesh mishom nimshachim haseich v'ambidas adi satoshim bedibur. Even this level of the nefesh, the atzmistika level, that seichel and midas now get connected to, through them coming into dibur, because dibur is rooted in etzem nefesh. Still, that's still not the etzem nefesh mamish from where dibur is rooted. And that can only happen when Ashpa comes Kavayocha from the Dibur itself, the Biadini.
Where do you see that in the words? What I see from the words over here is basically saying that the Darga of the Nefesh, that the Seichel Midas come from, which is basically Chetzei Sekeser, the way it's Mislabish and Dibur, is lower than the root of Dibur itself, which is really higher.
I think we said the same thing, but he's talking here about what Seichel Midas access al Yedei Yistapshuson B'Dibur.
Well, no, then they only access their own sherish, which is Chetzei Sekeser.
No. They're accessing Dibur's sherish.
Where do you see that in the words?
Because that's
I understand what you're saying, but I want to see the words.
They're accessing B'Ofen Kloli Etzem HaNefesh. Keser B'Ofen Kloli.
They're only accessing their expression, their sherish of where they come from.
No, you're adding those words, their sherish. That's not what he's saying. And they're not. They're accessing Malchus' sherish, but only on level 1, not the Etzer. They're before the Seichel and Midas do not have a direct connection to Keser, period. They only connect to Keser when they Nimshech and Dibur. However, he says that, and then that's why the whole Seichel and Midas become completely infused when it comes down into Dibur. However, that's still lower than, they still didn't access the Etzem of Keser. The Etzem of Keser happens when the Hashpa is not Mitzad Zob, but Mitzad Malchus itself. This is what he's saying till now.
That's the end of the Maamar, right? I understand what you're saying.
We said it's till now. Biadini. This is what Yehuda is saying to Yosef.
Do it for me.
Then come Moishe Kapara. Then you'll be Mamid. Then you'll be.
Yeah. Don't do it to express yourself. Do it for the Makabel.
Right.
I think that in the next few words, next few lines of the Maamar, it explains this difference.
Exactly. Key. He's explaining key because, let's continue. This that Seichel, the Midas, in the first case, the Giluyim, they're not, again, as you said before, not the Bekiruv, they're not B'chines Bittel, the Giluyim, the natural Giluyim of the Nefesh. So this that Seichel Midas, which are Giluyim, so this that they are drawn into Dibur, now, this is a big chiddush. This is a big chiddush for the human being to speak. It's not his natural state. His natural state is in his own mind, in understanding, in his feelings. So this that the nimshech and Dibur, that's chiddush level 1. The nefesh. This draws on the keser level, the blik vul shebenefesh, should be chol terei lamata, that it can descend. True. Gam inyan zeh shebenefesh, ubedarkas hanefesh shelamayle mesherish seichel. This is a lofty level. True. This is a lofty level that is higher than seichel midas itself, the ability to come down into dibur. So the paradox is that you're bringing down the idea or the feeling into words. You're drawing on a bligvaldik level of the nefesh, and therefore the idea and the feelings become intensified. You thought all you're doing is teaching. You thought all you're doing is expressing your feeling to someone, and all of a sudden you're saying it in words. The feeling grows, the idea crystallizes. True. Why? Because by bringing you down to Dibur to do so, you're accessing the bligvul of the nefesh that can descend. Mikol Malka.
Rabbi, isn't that also a proof? The fact that going through Malchus intensifies something is also a proof that you must be accessing something higher.
Yes.
Otherwise, you shouldn't be.
Sorry?
Otherwise, you shouldn't. There should be no hisofa just right. By using Malchus.
That's right. The fact that there's a sofa is indicative of the fact that Dibur is rooted higher than Seichel and Midas, which is why when Seichel and Midas get into Dibur, all of a sudden they're magnified. Still, that's the normal Seder Ashpa. That's the normal Seder Ashpa of Yosef, Val Picha Yishach Kol Ami. It's before Yehuda comes into the picture. Now, nonetheless, this is still a gilu, it's still not the etzem mamish. It's like a strong light that can go even further. So we're drawing on a very deep source of the light that can illuminate even a further place. But the emes of Dibur, which is not a gilui. This is a talent, ability. It's a bright light, very strong light. Sharshi be'etzem nefesh. That's mamish in the etzem, where there's no giluyim at all. And what would that be? That is a hashpah. That's not because I am expressing myself, but hashpah that becomes mitzad the mekabel itself. For Dibur, it means it's hard to find in the Dibur. It would mean, as we said yesterday, it just means when the hashpah is not because of Zoh's desire to be mashpia, but because of the need of the makabel. And when it's mitzvah the need of the makabel, then we're unlocking the true etzem. Now, how does it work with Dibur? We're talking about the Dibur itself, speaking, like giving over. It's like giving over the Inyan because it has to be said. Not because he's giving over the Inyan, because it's got to be said. And if it's because it has to be said, so that draws on the etzem mamish. And that's the biyadini. When Ashpa, like as we said yesterday, the yichud of Zoh and Malchus, when it's not because Zoh's the mashpia, and he has this desire to be mashpia, that's kesed, that's the rotzen. And the Ashpa comes, but the whole Ashpa to begin with is because that's what Malchus wants. So he's elaborating as we see this in Dibur. So how this would translate is, again, the shirish of the Keich HaDibur Atzmai. So that its shirish is truly in the Etzem HaNefesh. So that's when you're saying these words, or expressing this emotion, because you have to hear it. It has to be said. Not because I want to tell you. Not because, maybe that's clear. Not because I want to tell you, but because you have to hear it. Because I have a job to be mashpia. I like being mashpia. I got a job to be a teacher. I got to teach. But the Kabbalah has to hear it. If the whole focus is the Makabal has to hear it, and that's why they did what that draws on the Etzem Mamish.
Or not to say it because it makes me feel good.
Why does it make me feel good? Because he wants to be mashpia. He's paid for it, whatever the cheshbon is.
Because I have to express myself. It's that's my not my job. That's my.
It's even more than that. It's I want you to know.
Right.
I want you to know what I'm feeling. I want you, the Makabal, the teacher, wants the Talmidim to know the subject matter. I want you to know it because that's the shleimus of a teacher. And then there is, not that I want you to know it, you have to know it. It doesn't have to be me even. Teaching that way draws on the etzem nefesh. That's the chilek. I want you to know, or you have to know. First way is I want you to know. First way of Yichud of Zon Malchus is that he wants to express himself and he wants her to feel it. Taka is not selfish. Not
it's about the teacher.
He's not a behemoth. He's not
it's
a
about
behemoth.
the teacher.
Not a behemoth.
It's about the teacher, not about the student.
But it's still about the student.
Level one.
It's subtle.
No, it's the student is bringing out the teacher's shleimus.
Okay, the teacher wants the student to know. But yes, it's about a successful teacher.
But he cannot be a successful teacher if he's speaking to the wall. So the student is bringing out the teacher's mila.
Yeah. Yeah, you can put in those oisias, as opposed to as opposed to that the student should know. These words have to be said. You have to know this. Not I want you to know. You have to know it again. If someone else can teach it better, you got the job. With the greatest simcha, you would ask someone else to teach.
That will be the proof. That'll be the proof if the teacher is there for himself or for the students. If somebody else does it or does even a better job, and he's happy about it, then that means he's a good teacher. But if he's upset and bitter about it, that means the whole thing was basically about himself.
Yeah, even though he was a great teacher, or a mashpia, whatever it is.